Story 1. In second grade, 1993, I dressed up as Aladdin for Halloween. My grandmother worked hard to make the costume as authentic as possible, down to the little patch on the leg. Everyone complimented me on the costume, and I was riding high. Then I heard sobbing. Some little crap named John, a crybaby and overall bad student, also dressed as Aladdin, but his costume was garbage. No fez, just an off-color purple vest and some tan sweatpants. He was weeping uncontrollably because my costume was better. He ran and hid in the coat room. My teacher flipped her crap on me and made me apologize to him. I didn't do anything wrong. I just had a better costume. I reluctantly apologized to the little crap, shook his hand, and was forced to remove my costume and let him wear his. That kid. Story 2. My French teacher did not like me for some reason I could never guess. Anyway, one day during an exam, she came to my desk and accused me of cheating when I wasn't doing anything wrong. So I protested and said I'm not cheating. She then proceeded to take away my sheet and asked me questions on the test verbally. I replied correctly to all her questions. Now that she knew she had nothing on me, she wrote -5 on my sheet because of me daring to protest. Story 3. I got detention for saying okay to my home economics teacher in middle school. Seriously. We were in class, and she asked me to do something, and I replied, politely, okay. The teacher has a detention board, and a day later I see my first name on it. I have a very common name, and joking with her went, haha, that's for me, right? She said it was. I asked her what I did, and she said it was because I replied okay to her when she asked me to do something, and she hates when people do that. She just wants them to do it. I was stunned. I told her I wasn't going to detention. I got home and told my mom what happened. My teacher's son was in the same grade as my older sister, so my mom knew the teacher. She ended up calling her, and the teacher apparently was fumbling over her words trying to justify the detention. The next day she asks me, "You served this detention, right?" As a wink wink nudge nudge type of thing. I said no, and I'm not going to. She goes, "No, you served it, right?" I decided to just say sure, and that was it. Story 4. In high school. The year I got there was the year they instituted a rule that you had to display your ID at all times while at school. If you didn't have your ID out, you could get detention. Due to reasons, I got to school about an hour before the first bell and had zero way of getting back home or getting anything from home. Well, until the end of school, of course. So I get to school and realize, oh no, I forgot my ID at home. Well, no problem. I just go to the office and get a temporary one. Welp, turns out I should have tried to make it through the day without my ID, because I got detention anyway. And I knew that I had a greater than 95% chance of making it through the day without anyone who cared noticing I didn't have my ID. But no, I tried to do the right thing. Well, if you're at school, you taught me a terrible lesson. The school board. Oh, I know. Why don't we punish the people that do the right thing to help breed resentment? Story 5. I actually have a great story on this one. In fourth grade, or something, I had this old witch of a teacher we all really hated. Let's call her Catherine, her actual name. So I was hanging out in the schoolyard when some first graders came running towards me and kicked me in the nuts, with absolutely no reason whatsoever. So I started crying and screaming from the unbearable pain I was in. Catherine comes running and starts screaming at me for making a scene. She starts screaming at a little kid who just got his nuts kicked far up his stomach. So I scream right back at her, and she asks me if I want to move this whole discussion to the principal's office. Knowing I was being treated extremely wrong, my answer is of course yes. Catherine ended up getting yelled at by the principal for 20 minutes or so, and I got to go home 3 hours before school ended. Best day ever. Story 6. I got suspended for 5 days for playing catch with a rock in the gym. My throwing partner was on my baseball team, and we were very bored, since our agenda that day was to spend the entire time walking around the track. He missed one of my throws, and the rock bounced and hit a kid in the back of the leg. Cue the girl that hates us, who takes her couple of minions and go to the principal's office to say we were throwing rocks at the kid that got hit the entire time. School and my parents sided with that. My dad said he thought I was bullying the kid, despite never bullying anyone in my life. We were just playing catch with a rock. F you, Hope. Edit. I should add, I found out from my dad years later and over drinks that he knew I didn't hit the kid on purpose. He said he knew that, with my arm, if I wanted to hit the kid, he would have been in the hospital. He just wanted me to learn a lesson and cut the grass, which he made me do every day that week. Story 7. I went to an extremely conservative Baptist high school in Guam. I was punished for saying pretty insane things, hair being too spiky, singing Feliz Navidad during Christmas time, too worldly of a song, and getting caught with DVDs of mainstream movies. I was eventually expelled when a group of the super religious students sold me out for drinking a beer at a friend's birthday party on a weekend. At this time, the drinking age in Guam was 18. I was 18 when drinking said beer. Story 8. When I was in 4th grade, I was given detention for reading books too quickly. The teacher had divided the books by difficulty, and she thought I was stupid, so she put me at the lowest reading level, even though I was one of the smarter students in the class. I finished all the books within the course of about 2 weeks. When I told her that I was finished with them and would like to start reading the more difficult books, she called me a liar and gave me a week's worth of detention, claiming there was no way that I could have read and understood those books so fast. I saw her a few years ago, and she was surprised that I'm on the dean's list at my college, let alone at the college I'm attending. I'm graduating from college next year with the intention of going to medical school. I think I can read. Story 9. Public display of affection. My girlfriend and I were a few blocks away from school, kissing, when my principal pulled up in his SUV. He chastised us, and being a teenager, I told him, "Whatever, you have no authority here." Well, he didn't really like that, at all. The next couple of months before graduation, he had school security hassling me almost daily. Despite being in honors and vocational classes, having a high GPA, and being academically awarded every semester, I was being messed with. It all came to a head when I kissed, just a peck, my girlfriend goodbye before leaving campus. This ugly, irritating prick of a security guard who I'd had words with before caught us and tried to stop me from leaving. As I tried to walk past him, he threw himself in my path. I told him to F off. He went to an administrator and claimed I pushed him, which is assaulting staff. At this point, the crowd of students gathered around us got the attention of the principal, who took me into the office. I was suspended with a recommendation for expulsion only 3 weeks before graduation. A week later, at the hearing with the school board, they reviewed the security footage from the cameras in the hallway. It clearly showed me not pushing anyone, revealing the security guard to be the instigator and escalator of the situation, and a liar. The county agreed it would be best that a cool-down period of excused absences until graduation would be the best solution, along with striking the suspension from my record. So, even though I did get punished, it wound up being turned into a 3-week vacation from classes by the county school board. The best moments of justice came when the principal had to award me another academic achievement plaque from the county, not the school. When he put it into my left hand and shook my right, I looked him in the eye and muttered, "How's it feeling, dumbass?" During graduation, I winked at him when he handed me my diploma. F that guy. Story 10. Got punished for being punished. Teacher kicked me out because I was a minute late. Seriously. So I was chilling outside the class when the principal walked by and gave me an earful about delinquency and indiscipline. Real douchebag. Had a stick up his butt at the time and threatened to call my parents. Started spouting bullcrap on the phone, so I interrupted and told him that he cannot speak to my parents in such a way, especially when he's not speaking the truth. Gets frustrated and suspends me for 2 days. I have no idea what was wrong with him, but I enjoyed those 2 days. Story 11. I was once told I was not allowed to use the restroom. I was in a career and tech program during high school where I would go to another school for half the day. From there, I would ride a bus to our middle school. I would then wait for my bus to go home. One day, as I was waiting for the bus, I went to use the bathroom. I was stopped by the vice principal and told I was not allowed to enter the building. I'm not an argumentative guy, so I say nothing. I then wait when she's not near the entrance and I walk into the principal's office. Told him what had happened. He told me it was ridiculous and it would not happen again. It in fact did not happen again. Story 12. I got detention only once in high school. See, freshman year we had a brand new high school building, so there were strict no food, only water rules in effect that pretty much everyone ignored by senior year. Especially my English teacher, who didn't care if students showed up with mugs of tea. On that fateful day, I borrowed a tea bag from a friend who was also going to do tea, but we got spotted by a teacher in the hall who saw I had tea and ordered me to dump it out. She saw my friend's mug, but friend insisted it was just water, and the tea hadn't gone through yet, so it looked like dirty water, definitely not clear. So she was scot-free, but I just kept walking to the classroom, promising I would dump out said tea in the water fountain. But of course, I didn't. Anyway, this teacher blew a gasket that I disrespected her, so I got detention. I know, I was clearly a wild, out-of-control kind of teenager. Story 13. For me, it was a whole class detention. I was always the quiet kid who would get on with work and was rarely disruptive in class. Most of the teachers were well aware of this. But sometimes I would end up in detention because some people were misbehaving, and the teacher simply held the entire class back, including the well-behaved ones. It happened quite a few times, and I really hated it. The justification was that the good kids would pressure the bad kids. Somehow, teachers thought a shy, quiet kid like me could pressure the class clowns to keep quiet. I really don't know. Story 14. I'm from Germany, and in 9th grade I had to do a presentation on the Waffen-SS. I did a lot of research because I was interested in history. My teacher, who didn't even study history, stopped my presentation when I started to talk about foreign volunteers in the SS. She said that this is a German lie, and that she was shocked that I believed that anyone who wasn't blonde and blue-eyed could go to the Waffen-SS. I honestly couldn't believe that she was angry because I simply mentioned this fact. I argued with her and got in trouble for a questionable political view. After that, I had to go to a Jewish museum and think about what I did, and write an essay on Jews in Germany. When I asked other teachers about this topic, they hesitated to answer me and just didn't give me a reply. Really weird. In the 11th grade, I had a similar case. I got a bad grade for describing how World War II broke out, with all the details. The comment was unbelievable. Wrong. World War II broke out because Germany thought Jews were subhuman. The day I left this school was the best day of my life. Story 15. Standing near the end of the line. After recess and lunch break in grade 5, we had to line up to re-enter the school. I was near the back, and after about half the line made it back into school, the on-duty teacher stopped the line because the guys now at the front were causing some sort of ruckus. By the time those of us behind the ruckus were let in, we were a few minutes late for class. My teacher, Mr. Binder, yes, for real, had a temper. While the other teachers accepted why some kids were late, Mr. Binder kept all of us that were late in detention at the next lunch break. Another Mr. Binder story. Everyone in my class had a 30-minute slot on the classroom computer each week. My slot on this particular day came right after we got back from music class. Since it was my turn, I went over to the computer. The monitor was off, so thinking that the computer was also off, I hit the power button, which turned off the computer, which made Mr. Binder lose his work, and therefore his crap. Story 16. I can still remember it so clearly, as if it were yesterday. It was Miss Sidernam's French class in the language lab, and we were doing translations. I was probably 14 years of age. The work was in the present tense and read aloud by the whole class. Simple things like Julie is tying her shoes, or the cat is drinking his milk in the kitchen. Then it's my turn. The dog is in the garden, playing with his rocks. As the sentence I was saying filled my brain and left my mouth, I knew immediately I was in trouble. Even the last syllable was strained with my effort to stay cool. So juvenile, I know, but it was one of those tiny triggers that makes you totally lose it. A snicker. I tense up. A chuckle now. People look. The teacher, now also aware, utters those immortal lines and seals my fate. The nails in the coffin. Do you think that's funny? I absolutely exploded. Tears are streaming down my face. I can barely get air into my lungs. She yells and kicks me out, but I'm already on my feet and leaving. I have to get out. I enter the cavernous corridor on the other side of the door, and my laughing and coughing and spluttering echoes all around me. The dog is playing with his rocks, I say aloud to myself. It was a good day to be alive on this planet with everyone else, and everything was right with the world. I got in a huge amount of trouble and had to make more than one apology. I still think of it now, in all of its stupidity, and smile. Story 17. So it's the last day of middle school. We're all headed down to the auditorium for the end of the year award and whatever ceremony. Before we were leaving class to go, our teacher told us we have to sit boy-girl when we get down there. Now, you can imagine our disappointment when we have all of our friends there and we were told we can't sit next to them on the last day of school. Anyway, after the initial moans and groans, I asked her right before we left why we had to sit that way. Apparently, it was the tipping point, because she flipped out on me and told me to go sit in the principal's office during the ceremony. So I went down and sat in the office during the ceremony. The best part about this was that my dad was a teacher at the same school. He was in the ceremony, and little did anyone know I was receiving the biggest award for perfect attendance throughout the whole 3 years of middle school. After they called my name several times, my teacher had to stand up and tell the whole school that I was in the office and wasn't there. Needless to say, my dad was pretty pissed when he saw me after school. I explained to him I didn't really do anything, and he seemed to be more pissed at the other teacher after I explained. She was being a cow after all. Story 18. Everyone in the school got punished for wearing socks with logos on them, Nike, Adidas, etc. I went to a Catholic school until 8th grade, and the same nun had been principal of the school for most of that time. We obviously had a pretty strict uniform to abide by, but for whatever reason, she had a true disdain for socks with logos on them. So at one of our school assemblies, she spends about 10 minutes talking about the dress code, and how awful we are to be wearing socks and not representing the dress code. Well, as the mature Catholic children we are, nearly all students agree to wear knee-high socks with logos on them. Roughly 15 minutes into our coup, the principal comes to each classroom individually and goes absolutely nuts. A tear-filled tirade about socks to each classroom that all other classrooms can hear through thin walls. It was glorious. She never came back after that day. Story 19. Not really a stupid reason. Honestly, it was justified, but I feel like sharing. This was all in 2nd grade. I was the class clown, and my best friend was also a funny guy who gets in trouble a lot. He basically ratted on me and got me in trouble, so I wanted some revenge. Aftercare comes around, and I go, "Hey Robert, want to play a game I made up?" And he replies, "Of course." He had taken the bait. I explained to him the game, which I called Lion Tamer. He was supposed to pretend he was a lion and I was the tamer. I then carried out my master plan. While he was on the ground, I picked up a jump rope. Mind you, not the long ones, but the personal whip type. I proceeded to whip the crap out of this kid until he curled up into the fetal position and I was permanently expelled from aftercare. TLDR, whipped a kid with a jump rope and got kicked out of aftercare. Story 20. In high school, I had a camera confiscated, and the administration wrote me up and threatened to suspend me for breaking their policy on video games, phones, and other distracting technology. I was the photographer for the student newspaper, and the camera I was using was the school's property, not my personal camera. A few weeks later, the cafeteria was used for a commercial without any notice to students or teachers. I think it was for lunch meat. They had 3 to 4 large cameras, and they brought in paid actors instead of using actual students as extras. They ended up filming during lunchtime, so no actual students had any place to eat. After hearing all of the complaints and talking to my newspaper advisor, I had the camera again and went to take pictures of the commercial and the displaced students in the hallway, only to have it confiscated and written up again. Story 1. Not my story, but a close friend from back in college. He said that in high school, in one of his classes, his teacher was very deaf and couldn't hear in one ear, and basically was very good at reading lips. Come their first exam of the year, with the teacher standing in front of the room, kids started to just bow their heads down and literally speak out loud, "What is the answer to 12?" etc., softly, of course. Apparently, soon enough, there was just constant conversation throughout the whole class regarding most questions. He said that soon enough, an assistant or another teacher would sit in during tests or quizzes once the teaching staff figured it out. I still find it incredibly amusing to picture a class of 40 kids talking during the test, with the teacher standing right up front. Story 2. had a kid who would raise his hand and say something like, "I need help with number 13, or whatever number. I'm a teacher's assistant." Either myself or the teacher would go over to him and tell him to speak out loud, and give him whatever help he needed that we could give. I work in a special needs school, so sometimes they don't know definitions of words or struggle getting a point across if it's a short answer. It took me a few times to realize, but about 20 to 30 seconds after this student would say that, another student would sharpen his pencil manually, and he would twist the pencil either once, A, twice, B, 3 times, C, or 4, D, so that the other student could hear it. Imagine manually sharpening a pencil, that kind of click sound. The look on both of their faces when I took the sharpener away and told them to stay after class was great. Great way to cheat, though. Story 3. Not a teacher, but a story passed on by my father. When he was attending gymnasium, Germany's equivalent of a grammar school or a publicly funded prep school, history lessons were all about memorizing dates. The classroom used for history also had one large window, which the history professor usually had his back turned to while speaking to the students. This large window behind the history teacher would fog up in the winter. On one test day, some students decided to write out entire events and their dates on the window, using their fingers. The history teacher passed out the tests. The window slowly fogged up, and behold, everybody in the class could see the dates on the window, except for the professor, whose back was turned to it. Once the tests were collected, the history professor finally turned around and saw the window. All he said was, "That's good." The professor then graded the papers as normal. He must have seen too many instances of cheating that one finally impressed him. Story 4. I'm not a teacher, but 2 former professors of mine, who coincidentally shared an office, had great stories. They were both lit English professors, so they involve essays. The first was grading a student's essay and could just sense that something was off. It didn't match the rest of the student's writing. He simply emailed the student and asked him if there was anything he wanted to tell him. No accusation, but the implication was, "I know something isn't right here." The student came in at his next office hours and confessed that another student who owed him a favor had written it for him. Because he had confessed right away, the professor gave him a second chance. Redo the assignment for half credit, and he wouldn't report the student for academic dishonesty. The student soon handed in a new essay, and the professor again sensed that something was wrong, so he did a little Googling. The student had plagiarized from Wikipedia, and not just Wikipedia, but the Wikipedia entry about Wikipedia. He reported the student. The other professor had a student turn in an essay, and again, his spidey sense was tingling. A lot of the citations and quotes were too perfect. But he did some Googling and maybe turned it in and couldn't find any evidence of plagiarism. In fact, that set him on the right track. The professor went to the library to look for the books and articles the student had listed under works cited and discovered that they didn't exist. The student had fabricated the whole thing. He did such a good job at faking the citations, he probably could have done the actual assignment in the same amount of time it took him to invent his sources. Story 5. Chemistry class in high school. We had weekly labs that required a page-long summary of the procedures and results. We had groups of 4, and I was the guy in the group that did the work while the rest mostly sat around and gossiped. Sure as shit, the day the lab summary is due for one of the more technical labs, Abby finds me before class starts for the day. Chemistry is 5 hours away, and asks to borrow my summary. I told her not to copy it word for word. She agreed, and I got it back after the first class of the day. Chemistry class rolls around, and we all turn in our papers. The next day, we were working on a new lab when the teacher pulled me aside and asked me, "Did you write this paper?" I told him the truth that yes, I did. He responds with a simple okay before pulling aside each of my lab partners in turn. I don't know what they told him, but after the last interrogation, he talked to all of us. All right, spring-loaded giraffe gets an A, Abby gets a B, Charlie gets a C, and Nicole gets a D. You got those grades based on the number of spelling and punctuation errors in your paper. Turns out, Charlie copied off of Abby, and Nicole copied from Charlie, and the teacher guessed correctly. This same teacher would tell the class before each test, "Remember, cheating only helps your grade." Story 6. In 5th grade, we had an economics simulation where we were supposed to learn about having a successful business. We made little goods and had fake money, and at the end of the year, we could use the fake money to buy real goods in an auction. I was very bad at it. So I stole one of the stamps used to mark the money, got a date stamp, and proceeded to buy Xerox fake money, which I mixed into the real money. I kept small bills, didn't make enough to be suspicious, and changed the date stamp to dates that were consistent with the real bills. I had one accomplice. I told no one else. I wasn't caught. And I got a set of bath gels out of it at the end of the year. Surprisingly, I am now a full functioning adult and positive member of society. Story 7. My dad's a professor. When he gives tests to huge classes, he sets the students in seats according to their place alphabetically and distributes multiple forms so that no one sits next to anyone who has the same test, and he can know what test each student will be administered. Once, when he was grading, he noticed an abnormally low score. Below the statistical guessing rate even. His general procedure in those cases is to check to make sure that a student didn't actually skip a bubble line on the Scantron sheet, etc. Well, this student didn't do that, but the answers were awfully similar to the correct answers to a different form. They were in fact identical to the test belonging to the person on the student's right. So my dad, being a quintessential geek, calculated the chance that the student would guess randomly the exact same as the person to their right. It was somewhere less than 1 in 2 million, and included this statistic in his academic integrity violation report. Story 8. Back in high school, our sole math teacher was horrid, and was there only on a combination of tenure, and because Jesus says it's mean to fire people. Catholic school. Going to her for extra help was of no benefit to anyone. I barely understood the math, and 50% of the senior class was flunking algebra or pre-calc. I wrote an entire, admittedly simple, software suite for the calculators we all had to carry, which would show tons of common formulas as well as do them out for you, explaining each step so you could show your work, as was always required. I had a link cable for the calc, and doled the software out to jocks and dorks alike. Grades shot up, but the teacher started getting suspicious and required everyone to wipe their calc's memory and show her the big memory cleared screen before exams. So I wrote a program to fake that screen. A few people, myself included, had their GPAs saved, and now I build online training software and job aids, cheat sheets as a career. Work smarter, not harder, kids. Story 9. When I was in high school, I had a really mellow biology teacher. A little too mellow. He was notorious for leaving the classroom during tests. It got so bad that when he left, people would just shout out questions and answers to one another. Hey, what's the answer for 41? Which has more legs, a centipede or a scorpion? I think it's a centipede. You sure? Scorpions have a lot of legs, my dude. No, centi means 100, like centimeter or century. Scorpion has 6 or 8 or something, not 100. General murmur of agreement. There was this kid in our class named Assad, the son of some Pakistani general or something, who had some severe bully issues. Hey, punk walrus, you're the nerd here. Give me your paper, and he'd copy it. I got pretty tired of this, so I hatched a cheat of my own for the midterm. I asked the teacher if he wouldn't mind if I came in early and took the exam before school started. Then, when the second period came along, I'd turn in a complete 0 in a fake paper. He agreed to it, but made me promise not to give out the answers to anyone, and trusted me. So I did, and I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. When class came around, that kid copied my paper, and even though the teacher actually did stay in the classroom, he kind of looked the other way with a smirk when that bully put his eyes on my paper. I mean, I laid it on thick. If a multiple choice had A, B, C, or D, I'd put an E on the Scantron portion. During filling in the blanks, he was just creative. Question: name 3 types of plants. Answer: photovoltaic, nuclear power, Ford motor. He just copied it word for word. Dumbass. So when it was time to get our grades, I got a B. Assad got a 0. Lowest grade I have ever seen, my teacher said. Are you trying to be sarcastic or something? For what does a mycologist study? You put my daughter's name. I'm calling your parents for a conference. This was a good 25% of our grade, and Assad was in deep shit. Of course, he was livid and stupid. He accused the teacher of fraud and incompetence. How could I have gotten a 0? Punk Walrus got a B, and I answered everything the same. I'm also going to speak to your parents about your rampant cheating and summer courses you can take to make it up. Story 10. When I was in high school, there was this kid I called Chris. Chris was by and large a typical student. No weird dress, no bullying, no extreme displays of intelligence. He wasn't popular, nor was he a pariah. Not athletic, nor the fattest kid in school. His grades? Average. Just some A's and a few B's. But that changed quickly when someone discovered his dirty little secret. He was expelled for his actions, but I found him several years later, working at a gas station, going to community college for computer science. A fitting degree given his story. Chris would go to the school on a Friday night, when everyone was at home and relaxing and enjoying themselves, sometimes around midnight. He parked his bike in the nearby streets and made his way to the school under the cover of foliage. There was a mildly wooded field near the school, and find a small back door that led into the art and music section. He'd pick the lock on the door with picks made by hand, and sneak right into the school. He would then use a specific route that was unsecured by cameras to enter into the teacher-staff offices. All one room, lots of desks, and would do all manner of tasks. He would peruse the teacher's desk. If he found the copy of the test in question, he simply took out a portable scanner and began scanning whole tests. If the tests came out of the book, he would find any relevant sections and copy them down. Tests on CDs were extremely easy, he said. He simply used PowerISO to make a bit-by-bit copy of the entire disk. But some teachers handwrote their tests. So he devised the craziest solution I have ever seen. He made a little piece of hardware that fit into the keyboards that logged every keystroke, essentially a modified, stealthier, and much smaller version of this. The result? Every week, he'd get a huge text dump of hundreds of files, and would dig through them using a find function available on any text editor, like Notepad. He could steal entire portions of tests effortlessly. Then, it was as easy as looking up the answers and memorizing them, copying them onto tests, and getting A's. The surprising bit? He actually learned the material better than many of the other, more honest kids. How was he caught, you might ask? Well, there was a design flaw in his hardware that he used to log the material. The power necessary to run the keyboard came from the power that was supplied by the USB cord. It went in a reciprocating loop. If the hardware broke down, the circuit was cut, and the keyboard could not transmit data at all. It would not even power up. The Spanish teacher who discovered his ruse took it down to IT. He thought that the keyboard needed a deep cleaning since he ate lunch and maybe some crumbs got in there. Okay, so they pop it open and they find his little chip, micro SD card and all, frayed somehow. So the principal orders the IT guy to open every single keyboard. They deduced who it was solely by the Cinderella principle. There was no other person in the school who had all those teachers besides Chris. He was expelled and sent to juvenile hall for 6 months, plus probation. In the end, the school basically revamped everything. They had cameras running 24/7 on all doors. TLDR. Former student of my high school custom built a keylogger with an 8GB micro SD card, broke into the school, installed them in the keyboards, and came back periodically to steal info for tests. Story 11. Not a teacher, but the best cheating story I know. So there were a bunch of kids in my high school who you wouldn't see in any class in the whole semester, but they would just turn up for the exam. Everyone knows someone like that in high school. Anyways, this one kid, let's call him Dave, shows up to an English exam. He somehow gets someone to pretty much do the whole exam for him, essay and everything, and he somehow manages to have them pass all of the answers to him. And all he has to do is staple the answers to the question sheet and hand it in. So halfway through the exam, he walks up and hands in his work. The teacher takes it, turns it around, and reads aloud, "Pass this to Dave." Silence for 3 seconds. Teacher looks right at Dave. Dave looks at teacher, and all he can say is, "F***." Story 12. I went to a private school that used the Abeka curriculum, so all of our tests were prescribed and torn out of a book. The school would order 1 book of tests for each student enrolled that year. At the beginning of the year, our class managed to get a hold of one of the test books. not the answer key, just one of the books with all the tests in it. Before every test or quiz, they would distribute the blank one to me or the other nerdy kid in class. We split the test between ourselves, and the night before the test, we would research and answer the questions ourselves, then bring it to school for the rest of the class. The administration soon realized something was up because these other kids weren't too bright, never put much effort into the rest of their studies, and weren't smart enough to mix up their answers so as to not get every single one correct. Not to mention the teacher wasn't actually teaching the class. But that's another story. They had the entire class retake the test on the spot. Fortunately, because we were the ones who did the actual studying, and because we would learn the material instead of memorizing the answers, me and the other nerdy kid were the only ones who could replace our scores. So, they figured there must be cheating going on. Now, I should point out, I was very unpopular in school, never had anyone to sit with, and was always picked on or made fun of by the same kids who were happy to use me come test time. When Judgment Day arrived the day after the retake, the teacher pointed out that only 2 of us got the same score on the test. Then he basically says, "Only 2 of you got the same score. And she has no friends and always sits by herself, so we know it isn't her." It was so humiliating, but bittersweet. I didn't get busted and never helped anyone cheat again. Story 13. Not a teacher, but similar story. In stats, a friend thought he could sneak in a burrito and eat it by holding it behind a movable closet that was situated against the wall he was sitting near. When the teacher wasn't looking, he'd bring it out and take a bite. When the teacher was looking his way, he'd discreetly hide it behind the closet, and since he was close enough, it didn't look suspicious. Teacher is at the board talking about z-scores and statistical nonsense, and out of nowhere says, "And Cam, throw away that burrito. You know there's no food in my classroom." It turns out, people have tried to use the closet in the same way in past years, so he set up an unsuspicious mirror in the back. It looked like one you'd see in any classroom, to spy on people sneaking food in. Imagine the look on our faces when we thought he could see through walls. Story 14. I'm not a teacher, but yesterday my history class was taking a test, and the girl who sits next to me, she moved to the US from France a few months ago, doesn't speak very good English, and generally seems to be the typical hot dumb blonde type, took out a juice box. Then she opened up a small flap she had cut on one of the sides of the box and revealed the screen of an iPod Nano, the tiny new kind with the touchscreen. She somehow emptied out the box, put her iPod inside, cut out a perfect area for the screen, and resealed it so it looked like new. For the entire period, I watched her scroll through notes on it and ace the test, by the looks of it, while I could barely answer a single question. But then, as she walked by my desk to turn in her test, she placed the juice box on my test. All the notes were written in perfect English and included stuff I doubt even the smartest kid in the class knew. Today, our tests were passed back, and she high-fived me when she saw we both got 100%. French girls, man. TLDR. The harebrained French girl in my history class is secretly a juicebox genius.